Hello. How's everybody doing? Okay. I'm Catherine Lundstrom. Like was said, I work at Adweek, but remotely here from Austin. And I cover commerce and sustainability. And I'm really excited about this panel. I feel like it's one of these topics that's relevant across absolutely any industry, which is kind of cool. So yeah, we're going to be talking about internal mobility, talent retention, and yeah, reskilling, upskilling. So first I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, just name, title, and where you work. So maybe we can start here with Emil and then go down the line.
Sounds good. I'm Emil Kressel. I'm the Director of Learning and Development for the University of Texas at Austin. I walked here 2 blocks away.
So hey everyone, I'm Steph Ricks and I work for a company called Strategic Education Inc. and I'm the Director of Corporate Development and Technology Partnerships, and I flew here from Maryland.
Good afternoon, Tiana Carter, USAA. I'm from USAA. I am the HR business partner for our bank. Hopefully you have our banking products. If not, talk to me later. Really excited to be here, and I support all of our omni-channel contact centers, about 8,000 employees. So
Cool.
All right, and I am Jeannie Steele. I am the head of global talent acquisition for AMD, and I also drove here from South Austin. So good to be
I like
here.
this, how you got here also. I rode my e-bike from Windsor Park. Okay, so to kick us off, I'd like to talk about what specific benefits you've observed in your organizations from enhancing internal mobility, specifically regarding employee retention and talent attraction. Jeannie, do you want to kick us off with that one, and then we can kind of bounce around?
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going first because when we talked about this before, I told you AMD has not always been good at internal mobility. In fact, we've been really, really bad at it for a long time. The AI wave caused us to get pretty good at it quickly. We found ourselves in a situation where we had to really fast find thousands of engineers, and we couldn't find them in the external market. And so our leaders decided that if there was a 70% skills match, we were going to make the move with some of our current employees, and we filled about half of our urgently needed AI positions in less than a month's time with our current employees. And now we're pretty proud of what we do with internal mobility. It's been good for retention, and it's a fun TA story.
I think that story is so interesting because, I mean, we're talking about AI all of the time, and that idea of like being able to reskill your employees to like fill that gap is, I don't know, very interesting. Did anybody else want to jump in on that one? Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one here. How do your organizations align your upskilling and reskilling efforts with overall talent acquisition strategies? And what role does executive leadership and then HR play in coordinating all of those efforts together? Stephanie, do you want to start us off with that one?
Yeah, so at Strategic Education Inc., it's so interesting. Yeah, whilst I can talk about what we do internally, but we have the privilege of working with thousands of employers, both nationally and globally, to really kind of talk through this topic. And I think that what we're seeing from our partners and from our employer partners is that employers are now forced with thinking about education differently, education through the lens of upskilling and reskilling. And it's not something that can exist anymore in kind of a silo, but it has to be something that I think HR in general really have to kind of work together to figure out how it supports the actual kind of strategic priorities of the organization. And I think talent acquisition professionals are tasked with looking at how they create that link between education and career navigation, and then selling that to potential candidates to kind of market the organization as a company that cares about a trajectory, knowing that a trajectory is no longer, right, like linear, it's not a ladder, but it's very much so more a rock climbing wall, going left, right, up and down as we think about that. And then something that I think we notice is about repurposing a benefit that currently exists. So now we see TA working with L&D, working with comps and benefits to repurpose tuition assistance. Tuition assistance, right, is a benefit that a lot of organizations already have. So it's dollars that have already been allotted. And when we talk about it through the lens of how leadership can really get involved for those organizations that don't offer a level of tuition assistance or some kind of reimbursement. That's something that we should really all be thinking about offering, especially when we have Gen Z and millennials saying that I need my employer to invest in my education. So if you're not, that's definitely a focus area. But if you are, I think it's about revamping the policies, because some people would say, we have these policies, yes, we offer it, and I don't have to know where most people work, and I can tell you your utilization rate, and it's anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on the size of your organization. But when we think about utilization, the issues with that, there's a few issues. One, the policies they tend to be outdated. They usually say that someone can only, it needs to be for a degree pathway, something that potentially maybe aligns with their current opportunity and not kind of something outside. But could you imagine right now if I was an English major writing comms for the company, and the company is telling me, well, yeah, I need to kind of stay that course, but yet they're figuring out how to implement ChatGPT to do all the comms. Probably not the best way, right, to spend that time. So what we realized, so our company, Strategic Education Inc., we developed a platform. It's a SaaS platform, and it's called Workforce Edge. And Workforce Edge, I tend to describe it as an Amazon marketplace for educational opportunities. So it offers access to everything from a GED to a PhD, and then everything in between. So training, certifications, courses, you name it. And now employees are able to leverage those dollars that you give them, you empower them to take kind of learning into their own hands. And when we think about that, even from our entry-level individuals, talking about upskilling and reskilling, now they're able to leverage that benefit in a very strategic way to then learn and then step into different opportunities, really fostering that kind of notion of come for a job and stay for a career, because we're building that for you.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's so interesting to think about how this has changed over time and like how to repurpose then like those programs. Jeannie, did you have anything to add on this one?
Well, so AMD's approach has been a leaders coaching leaders model for a while, because we're developing technology that it's changing by the day, right? So the AI technology isn't out there. We're not able to recruit the skills from external markets. So our leaders have to train and coach their people to be able to grow their teams. We actually have a session that we call the Luminary Series, where our fellows, our corporate fellows, once a month teach an upskilling class to the engineers within the company, so that we're actually sharing knowledge and sharing best practices and emerging technology, almost in real time with our teams as it comes out.
Cool. Emil, did you have something too?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that idea of that, assistance that leaders have to align learning with their current roles. I think that that's a really antiquated way of looking at things. We at the University of Texas, we have a staff tuition assistance program, and it's totally underutilized because it has to be applied to the University of Texas at Austin. It's a competitive program. Admission process is really difficult. So we're trying to rethink of how to use that, but we're also, the University of Texas Austin also has a K through 12 program. So we're also looking at ways that we can empower employees to finish their high school diplomas. But it's a heavy hill to climb, because we also have Texas legislature and the Board of Regents, and they have policies that say if you're going to do any learning, it has to be directly applied to your current role. And in today's climate, that's ridiculous. I mean, you have to, if you're a boss and you have somebody come to you and say, well, show me how this is going to help you in your current role, the response should be, I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm just following my curiosity. Like, it's asked backwards. Like, you need to explore and figure out what you're going to do, and then that's how real innovation happens, so that you can actually apply it to this domain that you're working in. But if you have people just corralled into learning only about what they're currently doing, you're sunk. I mean, because if things are just moving too fast.
And to speak on the, were you going to say something? Okay, I didn't even look this way. It's so inconsiderate as well when you think about it from an employer perspective, because we all probably in this room, we know right now that our companies are thinking through how AI will impact our workforce. So they are aware of certain roles that will be eliminated, certain initiatives that will be displaced. And we don't know that yet. So for us to kind of stay the course because we're on this pathway, or we don't have the ability to kind of maneuver to create a space where skills are the currency versus, right, the degree, it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. Tiana, I want to direct this next one to you. I was curious what successful initiatives you've developed or seen that create clear pathways for employees to transition into new roles, and how those initiatives vary across the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So being an organization that's over 100 years old, with extraordinary tenure, I was joking earlier today over lunch that we have a 25-year employee luncheon each year, and there are thousands of employees attend. And that is because we have done an extraordinary job with mobility internally at our organization. And so, but we recognize, the skills shelf life is going a lot faster than it used to, right? Like what you learn today is going to be, in some cases, out of date in the next 3 to 5 years, right? So how do you maintain the level of rigor? And so what we've done is, I love your comment here a moment ago, Stephanie, about understanding skills of the future. We actually looked at out through 2030, we've launched an effort called Strategic Workforce Planning to look at what skills do we need in the next, 5 to 10 years for our workforce. Do we have them today? And if not, how do we upskill our existing workforce to have those skills so that they are ready and prepared? Now, granted, there's a level of agility, right? Like there's going to be new skills that emerge, like ChatGPT, where we're like, all right, just kidding. We need somebody deployed to figure that out. But it's done an extraordinary thing for our workforce because they can see themselves reflected in the future. And so at our organization, we offer free college for not only our employees, but also their dependents, which I think is extraordinary. We have a history in San Antonio where there's generations of families that work at our organization. And so we see our talent pool not just as our employees, but also their families. If somebody pays for your college, and it could be Purdue MBA or your undergrad, like we cover all of the things, you're more likely to feel like, I might want to come work there after. And so we do a lot in terms of supporting our employees in those wraparound services, but the skills are matched toward the jobs we know we need in our workforce. One of the things that we've also done with our engineering team, since kind of tech skills rapidly are changing, we have a skills kind of marketplace where our engineers or our tech teams can look at the skills for the future, and while they're in their current jobs, test and learn real time so that they can move into the new emerging skills jobs while they're still currently in their old jobs. So there's a nice transitional period. So we're doing a lot of innovative things on the skills side, and so happy to share more.
Yeah, cool. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Otherwise, we'll move on. Talking about the free tuition for families, that's so amazing. As someone still slogging through student loans, that's just like the dream. Okay. So from here, I'd like to talk a little bit about what ways learning and development can be viewed as a part of employee wellness beyond just kind of what we've already been talking about as these kind of perks and reskilling within the organization. Emil, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I'm going to preface this with this isn't necessarily how we do things at UT right now. It's how we'd like to do things, and hopefully one day we'll do things. But I really think it's important just moving forward for any organization, especially large organizations, to understand learning and development as a component of a full benefits package. There's plenty of research that shows that learning can reduce the symptoms of depression. It can fend off dementia. It can, for self-assessments, there are higher ratings of happiness and optimism. And there are things about learning that build community, and that all has to do with health and well-being. And it's the next frontier, because I think in the past we looked at learning and development purely as this way of perhaps, increasing productivity, and now we're understanding it's staying ahead of the curve and upskilling. But it really should be considered and understood that it's part of our mental health and well-being, and for that reason, we should include it as the full package of benefits. Yeah,
interesting. I mean, yeah, it feels very true. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? All right. So I'm curious how you're thinking about early talent recruitment too, when you're thinking about focusing on that early talent recruitment and having that support internal mobility as well. What benefits have you experienced from thinking about it in that way? Jeannie, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are struggling to find talent for the jobs that we have to fill. And so our leadership team put a goal out for 2024 that 40% of our hires this year should be early talent. And they defined it as 0 to 5 year talent. So we're working really hard with the UR team to make sure we're planting the seeds with our student population, that we're converting the student population. And then when we do convert them and we've got this, early talent in the organization, how do we hold on to them? We know that's a group that tends to turn over maybe a little bit more than the senior folks. So what do they want? What's their employee value proposition? A lot of times it is around, learning something new and how do I grow and how do I move up faster? So it's internal mobility and upward mobility for them. And we try to give them the opportunity to do both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that, it's interesting. We think of early talent in a few different ways. Of course, your college grads, but about 30% of our workforce are also military affiliated. And we have a huge focus. I think 33% of our hires this year were veterans. And it's a huge focus on reskilling and upskilling. You think about the resiliency, you're a combat engineer, you're creating bombs. Like you might not be 10 years into your career, but you're year one in a corporate setting, right? And so we have a lot of programs that we're designing around how to create that wraparound experience for our newer but tenured veterans that come into our workforce. Typically, you see a high turnover with veterans. They'd have to take about 2 to 3 different jobs before they figure out. Our goal is not to have that. So we do a lot to help them with career exploration and rotations. We recently launched a military leadership development program where it's officers coming out or senior military enlisted, and they get to rotate through every line of our business for a month to figure out if I want to be in audit, if I want to be in HR, if I want to be in property and casualty, operations, et cetera, till they find their home. And then throughout that process, they have sponsors and support that help advocate and get them kind of settled in. And so that's an 18-month program that helps that early talent for us. And it's kind of an untapped talent pool, quite frankly.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. I mean, yeah, being able to see like what you'd be getting into before actually taking a job is also kind of the dream.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to be what you can't see. So like if you've never known what audit is, like why do you want to wake up to be an auditor? So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Totally.
No offense to the auditors.
I just wanted to add to that too, that again, at UT, you have so many different disciplines, and we want to be able to provide people who aren't necessarily just moving up a ladder in their career, but sort of that lattice approach. So people who are in custodial services might be interested in administrative services, and we want to be able to provide those career transitions, and that all happens with learning and development. Later on, we might talk about career paths, but you can't just develop the career paths without aligning learning paths. You have to provide that structure so that people can learn how to actually move into those roles. And that might not necessarily be a vertical move. It might be horizontal from a completely different position. And now that should be expected because of how quickly things are moving. And you should be able to provide that reskilling, for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of tees up the next question here about, these cross-functional training programs and how those can contribute to internal mobility, or I like the lattice that you talked about instead of a ladder. But what kinds of challenges have you encountered in trying to implement those programs? And then how has that kind of played out to benefit internal mobility at your organizations? Stephanie, did you want to start with this one?
Yeah. So I think, defining the challenges, I think the first one is around where does this live? So upskilling, reskilling, however you think about it, does that live with L&D? Does it live with the leaders of the business unit? And is it something that we're thinking should be kind of self-driven, right? We even know what that may look like differently for generations. I mean, our parents knew what they wanted to be. They got into the thing. They followed this kind of ladder. They did the thing. They're doing the thing. I think as we kind of look at the generations now below that, I think it's different. So to think that it should be kind of self-driven while the world is changing. And I think that's the second piece. The world is changing. Business needs are changing. I can even speak about that from a higher ed perspective. I mean, you think about course curriculum, it takes months, sometimes years to get curriculum approved. And by the time it's approved, then the business is saying, well, no, we no longer are interested in that. So when you think about that even systemically, they're of course always going to be behind. So I think there's something to be said about companies really building some of these programs internally, or partnering with organizations that build them for them. So I designed a program at my organization that's leveraged by companies, and it's called Tech Inspire. And the program, ideally, the vision was around upskilling, because to your point earlier, it was for employers who are having a hard time gaining access to talent to fill in-demand roles, specifically in the tech space. So if you're thinking cybersecurity, generative AI, all the things, we'll go out, we will find the talent for you, we'll sit with you, get a sense of your business needs, we're gonna infuse that into our curriculum. So we have the hard skills covered, you give us your soft skills, so what makes the ideal, right, candidate for your organization, then we'll train those individuals, and then we turn them over to you to be interviewed. What we found, so to talk about internal mobility, I was working with an employer, and he said, wow, this is great, because TA, right, talent acquisitions, thought that this was beneficial because that supports, right, new talent into the organization. But from an internal mobility perspective, the head of the VP for IT application in the org said, well, wait a minute, it would be amazing if we could look at the talent that we already have and upskill or reskill them, rather, to fill some in-demand roles that we know are going to be on the horizon. Because now, instead of displacing them because we're going to have to let them go, let's use this in real time, and let's teach them SQL and Tableau and Power BI, and then we can shift them into these open recs that they currently have. And I think when you do that, now you're really creating a culture where it's not about just net new talent, which you do need, especially when you think of an aging population, but it's really about investing in people while they're with you, and really giving them the tools. Who knows what the tools are going to be, but working with them to find out so that they can be successful and step into varying opportunities within your organization.
Yeah. I know you've all kind of talked about some of these programs that you've implemented. Did anybody else want to share some of the challenges that they've faced and how you overcame?
I'll share just a little bit. I mean, I think that it's really important to have that structure, for sure. You want to make sure that people have the access to that learning. But one of the problems I think we face, at least in certain sort of sections of UT, is you also have to have a culture of continuous learning. And if you don't help people with that kind of metacognition and helping them know how to learn, then none of that's going to work. And you have to instill that in the business process. So making sure the leaders understand that learning is expected of the people who work here, that's really important, because that allows people to explore. Because what Tiana said earlier, that you don't know what you don't know. Same thing, you want people to be curious and sort of explore to find out where their heart is and where they can have a really positive impact. But you have to have that as part of your culture, that everybody is learning all the time.
One of the things I would just add, I sit on the San Antonio Workforce Board and the Education Partnership Board. And sometimes what we see is when we partner with large-scale institutions, the inverse is true, where we have new grads coming out, say on the engineering side, and what they've learned in the sandbox is actually not the challenges we have in corporations, right? And so they get there, they're excited on their first day at work, and they're like, wait, this is not what I learned in class, right? And so what we've been doing is partnering directly with the university presidents to look at their curriculums, and we've been exploring, we haven't launched it yet, but faculty externships, where the faculty will actually come and potentially work at the organization during the summer so that they can see how it actually operates in real life, so that when they go back to train the students, it's based off of what they've seen in the corporations. And so we see sometimes there's a gap there with, theory versus reality. And so we're trying to figure out how to remedy that to accelerate the ramp up time from when they graduate to when they start.
Yeah,
We have done that, and it worked. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, but I think also, and again, because we all should be accountable, right, in the room as well, I think there's something to be said about employers where we want this and we say we want to try these new initiatives and we want to open our doors to these opportunities. But then when it comes time now to offer opportunities to individuals that went through training, there's some hesitancy on the employer side where they're maybe a little scared. I don't know if this person's a fit, or I don't know if this person is necessarily ready for the opportunity. And I think that's where we can potentially even see some DEI conversations happen there, because when we think about, sure, you have your career changers and some people who have the luxury of career changing at a high level. But when we're thinking about career changers at that very entry level and some roles that are not the most sexy of roles, then we are talking about some individuals that, yeah, maybe they have the hard skills, but they don't have the soft skills. Mm-hmm. And it's really about employers wanting to invest in people and believing in people's ability to change and learn and grow, to open up their doors to hire someone that of the 10 things, maybe they don't check all 10, maybe they check 7. Mm-hmm. You should be able to provide the rest.
Yeah.
I just want to add one more quick thing. And that I think
this was a good one.
That's really true. And I think that's another thing for hiring units or employers who are really draconian about looking at the hard skills. Obviously, you don't want to hire a brain surgeon who doesn't have that hard skill, but you also need to have some wiggle room for certain positions. And, if it's a software language, or even if it's a certain trade, and understanding that they do have this human skill or the soft skill, this, aptitude to learn and be agile, like that's what you're really looking for. And you might be having a hard time, as an employer finding somebody, but you need to think about, well, maybe I'm looking for somebody who actually can learn that pretty quickly and be agile about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're kind of already circling around the next question here, which is about fostering a culture of internal mobility and employee engagement, and like how that can lead to retention in your company and ways to strengthen that culture. Tiana, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, certainly. So I joke sometimes because, prior to this role, I was the head of diversity and culture at Waste Management, and now I'm at a bank. So I like to say I went from trash to cash. And you can imagine the two culture differences, right? And in both cases, I've led culture, right? And there's a lot to be said about, and I love what you're talking about from a hiring perspective, teaching your leaders about culture adds versus culture fits, right? And like, is this person going to bring something new to the team versus replicate? I think if we all close our eyes, we can imagine what we think when we think about a banker, what that person might look like, right? How do we evolve a 100-year-old culture to be open to different levels of authenticity, different levels of engagement, different perspectives, different creativities? And so I'm proud of our organization because we pride ourselves on being innovative, and to be innovative, you have to have diversity of thought at the table and diversity of skill. But having navigated culture transformations at 2 companies where we had 50,000 or more employees, there's a kind of a few levers that I always look at when I pull. It's looking at the work. Like, are we making the work easier? Are we leveraging AI? What tools are we providing for the workforce, which needs to constantly be evolving? The workforce, what are the leadership development infrastructures, the talent management? How do we reward? How do we incent people? How do we encourage a culture of learning and hold them accountable? And then the workplace, what are the systems and structures? Have we designed our operating models to be a culture of learning and development? Have we incentivized that? So if you have, if you're familiar with like lines of defense in the bank, right? You can have your first line, which is your business operators, your risk team, and then your auditors, right? So the 3 different lines of defense. If your risk team is not incentivized to help the business grow, then when your first line is trying to roll out a new product, a new service, there's going to be friction in that. And that doesn't create a culture of collaboration, right? So we look at all of those systems behind. I think sometimes people think about culture as like food and fun, which it's those things too. I love a good Taco Tuesday, right? But what are the systems that will enable folks to be successful when you're sitting at your desk day to day trying to get your job done? Have we created a culture for people to be successful in that regard, and a culture of learning as well? And so I spend a lot of time doing that work, and I think to our leaders' surprise, shifting the culture of a 100-year-old company it's a challenge, but it's one bite at a time. It's like every interaction, every conversation, every town hall. How do we make sure that steady drumbeat of like creating a culture of learning, creating a culture of care and compassion is woven throughout how our leaders show up on a day-to-day basis? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? I mean, that's kind of been like within the fabric of the conversation the whole time. I think in this conference season, we can't get away from talking about AI quite a bit on a stage. I feel like every panel, it's like a countdown to see how long we can go before we talk about AI. But and we've already talked about it a little bit in I think a really interesting way. But I did want to ask. I feel like a theme here too is like the way that technology is changing how all of these systems have to work. So I wanted to ask, like, how is technology being utilized, especially when we're talking about AI, to facilitate the upskilling and reskilling efforts that we've been talking about? And how can that lead to better talent acquisition efforts and internal mobility? And do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So it's true. It's everywhere. I think to talk about what we're doing right now is futile because it's moving so fast. But I will say that I think that there are certain things that you need to be aware of as you try and implement AI as through the lens of learning and development or through workforce mobility. And the first thing is that AI is only as good as the data it gets, and it's only as good as the prompt it gets. And for that reason, it's really important that you have the integrated system. So in my case, it's really important that we have our human resource information system integrated with our learning management system so that everything has these connecting points. So for instance, the position or the job is defined largely by skills. The person, their CV, is defined largely by skills. The learning, whatever it might be, a course or a video, the learning objective is defined largely by skills. And you have that interconnectivity, then you're able to really employ AI in an interesting way, where down the line you could ask, we have this problem where, we're seeing a lot of dysfunction in our processes and we're wasting time and money. And a prompt might come back, this guy, Mark, in your organization is ready to move on and he's a process analyst or a business analyst, and he has these skills that would help resolve those problems. Or your current, employee, Sally, is your senior administrative associate. You can upskill her at this cost and hopefully address some of these problems. And so it's because of the information, sort of the data points talking to each other and looking at everything with those ideas of skills always sort of defining everything. And that's where really interesting things can happen with AI. But you need the foundation first.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done from an AI perspective, really on the culture piece and around morale, is, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Slack channels or Slack threads, like it's like a vortex,
familiar.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can get in there. Well, we have thousands of employees that are in Slack every day, and we had our team was trying to figure out, like, how do we really gauge employee sentiment with our Slack channels? And so we like to take the Apple approach of, like, not first, but best, right? So we haven't been like all over the AI thing, but what we have done is in the very curated ways have tested AI within the bank setting. And so any of our employee meetings, we might have, 5,000 comments, like, throughout 1 hour period, or any of our daily channels. And so we have AI now go in and read through all of the language and then identify the top key themes. And then our communications and HR teams then say, hey, we heard that these are the top 3 things y'all cared about during the town hall or had questions on. And now here's like a follow-up short podcast video to answer your questions on that topic. And so closing that feedback loop is, again, important on a culture of speaking up, feeling as though my voice is heard, feeling as though I have a place here. And we've seen it prove to be really successful with our employees. And each time we learn more and more, and they're feeling like, oh, they hear me. And so we're now getting to kind of the root cause or underlying challenges our workforces have. And that could be on learning. It could be on, today it was all about, you gave us development hours, but we don't have time to take them. How do we take, so then we were able to kind of create a video around development hours and how to, like, coordinate your work schedule around that. So, but AI has helped us a lot with that.
Really cool.
Yeah, cool.
I love that so much because that is such a great example of how AI, and you're showing your employees, we have AI, we're using it, and it has nothing to do with your job security. And I think that is really what employers really need to start doing, because I think about how we use it now. I mean, right now, everyone and all the leaders are probably in that kind of strategic planning phase, right? Getting ready for 2025. Can you imagine, like, what years ago we'd be spending weeks prepping for 4 days away to do something and then coming back and then putting together a deck for 3 weeks to get all these approvals on this deck to then present out that this is what the plan is. Well, I can sit down, put all my thoughts on paper, put it into ChatGPT, tell it, because we were trained on kind of like prompt engineering, exactly how I wanted to showcase the next 1, 3, 5 year strategy, build it out for me in these ways. And then I take that document that ChatGPT will give me, and then I put it into beautiful AI. And then that creates the deck. And before, it would take me a full week to do this deck. And then I put in like the prompts around like, and legal will not like these words, so please don't use these words. So now, but the deck gets approved. And now something that would take months is now essentially taking me, maybe 2 weeks tops. And so it just kind of, I don't know, put me on steroids, because it's still my thoughts, right? Like, this is still my vision, but now it frees me up to now go do some other strategic things. Because what we find is then at the end of the year, when we look at our roadmap, well, did you even complete half the stuff that you said you would do? Probably not, because you didn't have time. Now I give myself the time to actually complete the roadmap and then some.
It's interesting. We have about 15,000 call center reps, right? And so when you think about ChatGPT, like, that's probably the most disruptive to our frontline workers who are on the phones, or like chatbots or all these things. I think our digital experiences now account for almost 60% of our customer interaction. So there's a lot of fear in the system about, like, am I about to be displaced? And how we continue to position it to our workforce is upskill yourself, so that when we evolve to the place where those repetitive, lower skilled, like, what's my bank balance, what's my, all of those things are replaced, you can handle the complex.
Right.
Yep.
So that strategic thinking, that critical thinking, those problem solving, the end-to-end management of a member or customer are more and more important. And that's the soft skill stuff, right? And those are the soft skill things that take a little bit longer to develop. And so that's how we're positioning it to our workforce. But eventually, inevitably you have a group who are like, I've been doing it this way for 20 years, and so it might be my time to retire. But we're seeing that as a smaller part of our population.
Yeah, so interesting. Jeannie, did you have anything on the AI stuff? I know you have a different perspective.
As an AI product company, we were challenged by our executive team to find ways to use AI internally. We are fairly conservative, and as an 85% engineering organization, you might assume that skills-based approach for L&D was not received well. Like, the engineers were like, I'm not going to go tell you about me. Like, you figure it out, but I'm not going to tell you so you can replace me. Like, that's not going to happen. So we haven't really gotten too far along with the L&D approach for it. We are very actively using AI in talent acquisition, mostly for, the tactical, make me look smart in 3 minutes kind of thing. And I'll throw my thoughts in here, and writing job descriptions, writing references, writing, interview notes. But we also have been using technology to train on our AI skills. So we're upskilling our talent through a LinkedIn enterprise package for everyone, because we found LinkedIn had online training that's being updated almost daily for AI. And so it was a benefit for the employees. It gave them a way to kind of choose their own path, maybe, and be responsible for their own growth, because they can pick and choose whatever plan they want with that system. So those are a few of our things.
Yeah,
Just a quick comment. We also have LinkedIn Learning available at no cost to all students, faculty, and staff at UT. And the piece that I didn't say in that little analogy of finding a business analyst, a process analyst, and upskilling is that also, because your learning objectives are tied to skills, you can also say, and by the way, here's how you do it. Here's how you learn. And it's beneficial to the person too, because the ultimate goal is to place the people and optimize them in the position so that they have the greatest positive impact on the organization. So that person who says, I don't want to define by my skills, then they're not going to be able to be seen to optimize them for the organization. But yes, LinkedIn Learning would be one way that would allow you to say, here's that learning path that will provide you that career movement.
Great. Well, I think we're just about out of time here. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you all for your attention, and have a lovely rest of the day.